This broadcast is brought to you courtesy of amateur radio station VK7AX in Ulverston, northwest Tasmania.
Greetings listeners, this is VK3OTN, the official station of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club of Australia, with this month's news and information bulletin for members and friends of the club for April 2026. I am Andrew, a VK3 Charlie Alpha Hotel. Details on when to hear the news and information bulletins are available at the club's website, www.raotc.org.au. VK3OTN is available on a wide range of radio platforms, HF, VHF and UHF, along with 2-metre repeaters, amateur television, DMR, that is digital mobile radio, and D-Star. These news broadcasts are available for download for up to 6 months, just in case you missed the original news broadcast from the RAOTC website. Just put RAOTC into your favourite search engine. If you'd like to contact the club, then why not send us an email? Our address is raotc@raotc.org.au. I hope you enjoy this month's news broadcast. Welcome to the latest RAOTC Club news for April 2026. The RAOTC Committee of Management met on Thursday, February 19, using Zoom teleconference. This is usually a housekeeping event to clarify any issues needing to be addressed. Unfortunately, 2 of our committee members were unable to attend due to other unforeseen commitments. It was with deep regret we accepted the standing down from committee of Mike Alsop, a VK8MA. Not that he wanted to, he simply had other matters needing his attention. Mike assured us that the broadcast from Catherine on 10 metres will continue when he's able to. That reminds me that if you feel you can offer any help, then please step forward. You don't have to physically travel anywhere, with telephone, email and Zoom teleconference being used to keep everyone in touch. Perf promos. I've mentioned this particular matter before, however we are still after someone from VK6 to take over doing the promotions for the local Western Australia amateur radio news. Clive Wallace, a VK6 CSW, is not going to be able to do it forever. While on the subject of Western Australia, many have heard about an event called Perth Tech, occurring on a more or less annual basis by VK6 ARN, WA Amateur Radio News. Not having attended it myself, however, just hearing about it, it consists of a program of rolling technical forums and demonstrations, with the venue hire being funded by an assortment of means, including a raffle. Those in Victoria are also indeed fortunate to have a similar event coming up in April, not too far from Melbourne, in West Gippsland, at a rural property in Druin. What is even better news is this event is sponsored by 5 different radio clubs and is for those that attend free. Put Antennapalooza, all one word, into your search engine to find more details. The event goes over the weekend, with the main day being Saturday, kicking off at around 12:30, and consists of a rolling program of forums and demonstrations. The directions given are not very difficult to follow and will give you a great day out with like-minded amateurs with a great program, and also catch up with many amateurs who are also members of RAOTC. Anzac Day. Please remember that we are allowed to use the AX prefix 3 times a year, with Anzac Day being one of them, along with Australia Day and World Telecommunication Day on May 17. So why not try the AX prefix on Saturday the 25th of April as well as May 17? Daylight saving ends. Don't forget that daylight saving ends in the 4 southeastern states and the ACT on Sunday the 5th of April, so mainland Australia goes back to 3 time zones instead of 5, for exactly 6 months of the year until the first weekend in October. This date is the day immediately prior to the April monthly news broadcast, and also happens to be Easter Sunday. Norfolk Island remains at UTC plus 11. Pay close attention to the club's website, as some of the broadcast times are in local time and some are in UTC. For example, the 20 metre broadcast beaming north from Melbourne is at 0100 UTC all year round. RAOTC subscriptions. The annual RAOTC renewal notices should all have been enclosed along with the latest OTN address sheets. Committee, along with our paid-up financial members, would be greatly appreciated if you could attend to this in a timely fashion. For the benefit of those that are a little on the tardy side and only pay after reminder notices are sent out, it loads extra work onto our membership and or administrative officers, costs the club time and money sending out reminder letters, and places an unnecessary financial burden on the other financial members of the club. New RAOTC privacy policy. Many of us are aware of significant data breaches in recent times by companies such as Optus and Medicare here in Australia. This involved in significant disclosures of customers' personal details to third parties, which federal investigators are still trying to unravel. How does this affect you? Some details, for example, name, financial details, mailing address and so on, are not on the club's website or stored in the cloud or anywhere else. The privacy policy was developed upon guidelines from many other organisations. The good news is that no information is kept online, it is all kept offline. The only information held online is your call sign, membership number and a unique code in order for you to download an electronic copy of OTN from the club's website. By now, everyone should have received the latest copy of OTN, Old Timers News, which has a total of 48 pages full of interesting articles. On the address sheet, along with the name and address, is your member number, and just to the right is your access code to enable you to download the latest edition and all previous editions in full living colour from the club's website. The committee has received some very positive feedback about this service. There's no plans to produce a printed version in colour, as this would be a very expensive exercise. Melbourne March Luncheon. The latest March 2026 luncheon was held at the Caulfield RSL on Thursday the 26th of March. Peter Cousins has to defer due to health issues. The stand-in speaker was Peter Marks, the VK3TPM, and his presentation was entitled AI and Amateur Radio. You've probably at least heard of ChatGPT and perhaps asked a few general questions of where large language models really shine in software development. Peter Marks, VK3TPM, has been using Anthropic's Claude code to develop software for amateur radio. A recent experiment to do work on amateur radio's foremost example of AI, FreeDV RAID version 1, was able to do months of expert work in just a day. Peter demonstrated practical examples of development with Claude and also bring us up to date on the latest advances in digital voice over HF, which is taking off around the world. Mick Amped, VK3 Charlie Hotel, recorded the talk and is now available for those who are unable to attend, with a link to the YouTube video on the club's website. Go to www.raotc.org.au and then under the lunches menu, pun intended, select recordings, and you can see and hear it along with many other previous technical talks. With many older members a little out of their comfort zone driving in inner Melbourne traffic, the feedback regarding the venue is absolutely fantastic. We are indeed very fortunate to have this venue. I'm starting to wonder why we stayed at the Bentley Club as long as we did. New members and silent keys. Today I am pleased to welcome the following new members to the RAOTC. Rob Mackey, VK2 Quebec Romeo, became full member number 1899 on the 6th of December 2025. James Craig, VK5 Juliet Charlie became full member number 1900 on the 7th of December 2025. And finally, Jeff Griffiths, VK6 Yankee Romeo, became full member number 1901 on the 2nd of February 2026. The committee looks forward to you enjoying a long and rewarding membership of the RAOTC. Silent keys. It is with regret I report the following silent keys that have come to the attention of the membership officer. Ian Brown, VK4 Delta Bravo, member number 1283. Randall McDonald, VK3 Romeo Mike, member number 1870. Brian Young, VK3 Bravo Bravo Bravo, member number 1058, and Rob Gurr, VK5 Romeo Golf, member number 1500. Let us pause a moment in memory of our departed colleagues. And that's about all the club news we have for you this month.
You are listening to VK3OTN and associated relay stations. VK3OTN is the official station of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club Australia Incorporated, with the monthly news and information bulletin for members and friends of the club.
In this month's broadcast, I have two articles that I hope you find interesting. Clive, VK6CSW, will tell us about the memoirs of A Long Life in Radio by Alan Cruther, VK3SM, from an article published in the September 2014 edition of OTN. It is of interest that Alan was 91 years old when he submitted this article, and is an indication that you're never too old to submit an article about your own personal experiences to OTN to share with other members. Alan is listed in the obituaries in the September 2018 edition of OTN, so this would make him around 95 when he became a silent key. This will be followed by myself, Andrew, VK3CAH, and will tell you about broadcasting around the clock and the introduction of 24-hour MF broadcasting, in particular to the ABC National Service, from an article that appeared in OTN a couple of years ago.
And now, over to Clive, VK6CSW, with the feature item for this month's news session.
Regular listeners to these broadcasts, who are also members of the RAOTC and therefore receive the OTN Journal, know only too well that the editor of OTN is always asking for more radio old-timers to record their radio stories for posterity and to send them along to be published in the RAOTC magazine, and also for possible inclusion in these broadcasts. All radio old-timers have interesting tales to tell, and the OTN editor has informed me that he has received several very interesting historical stories and anecdotes from members in the past few weeks. The following is just one of those, and was received from 91-year-old Alan Cruther, VK3 Sierra Mike, RAOTC member number 311. As an introduction to Alan's article, I should, first of all, call listeners' attention to the superb article by Winston Nichols, VK7 Echo Mike, entitled The Green House, published in the September 2013 issue of OTN Journal, which covered the story of the telecommunications links between Victoria and Tasmania from the days of cable through HF and VHF and eventually to microwave. And now to the article entitled A Couple of Reminiscences from a Long Life in Radio by Alan Cruther, VK3SM. Alan writes, after reading the From the Members letter by Stan Roberts, VK3BSR, in the March 2014 issue of OTN, I decided that I should also pass on a few thoughts that the Greenhouse article by Winston VK7EM brought back to me. In 1944, I was a mechanic grade 2. This was later changed to technician in the PMG main trunk test room in Melbourne. As I was young and had transport, a motorbike, I was told to go to Apollo Bay and do relief duties at the cable station there. I performed a 2-shift roster with the station senior mechanic, keeping the Victorian end of the cable to Tasmania alive. This consisted of doing routine checks, starting the large petrol motor each morning to charge the batteries that had been on load the previous day, washing and polishing the lino floors, and also keeping the lawn and garden outside the building respectable. On Sunday mornings, the cable was taken out of service to perform insulation tests as trouble was developing where it passed over the Sea Elephant Shoal near the King Island coast, and also at the junction of the deep sea and shore end cable at Apollo Bay. Later, both of these failed and were repaired. At this time, it was considered important, and the cable station was a significant piece of local tourist industry. It was nothing for a family, or even only one person, to arrive at the door and ask, "What is a cable station? Can I see over it?" This often provided a welcome relief of the day, although it could be rather troublesome. Having finished my relief duties at the cable station, I was directed up to the Tanny Bryn station to perform similar duties. This building was up one of 2 rather dangerous roads at the time. The main road to Skeens Creek was the most popular and the better of the 2, but Wild Dog was a very much more interesting ride in the nice weather. However, at times in bad weather it was almost impassable. These roads had a big effect on my time at Tanny Bryn. Being situated right on the top of a very steep hill with an open view of Bass Strait and King Island just visible on the horizon on a clear day, wind and rain were a constant problem. On one occasion that's rather memorable, my relief partner arrived rather late and very bedraggled. On the way up, he was stopped on Skeens Creek by a landslide and a fallen tree, so had to go back and come up Wild Dog. The wind was blowing a gale and rain was coming down in sheets. I decided that, with the weather being so poor, I would stay and sleep in one of the bunks provided. A little later, one of the transmitters shut down and investigation showed that it was sopping wet. The rain, instead of falling down, was blowing up under the eaves of the building, across the roof space, and dropping through the ventilator directly over the transmitter. We had to arrange a tarpaulin under the opening to redirect the water and then dry out the transmitter and get it back on load. As we were so far from anywhere, we had quite a good kitchen at Tanny Bryn and kept supplies for these emergencies. However, often at other times we made ourselves some good hot meals. One vegetable in particular was never in short supply, as the farmer next to the site had potatoes growing, and we would go out and bandicoot several where necessary. I often wonder if he ever found out why those plants near the fence never had as many spuds as elsewhere. Many years later, when I was a supervising technician in headquarters, I had the job of taking 2 visiting engineers from Malaysia down to Mount Oberon. Mount Oberon is also quite remote, being perched on the top of a mountain with unrestricted views in all directions and, as a result, had no protection from wind and rain. The first building was built of concrete breeze blocks, which of course require sand to make the mortar. A load of sand was delivered and dumped, but next morning, when the brickies arrived to lay the bricks, there wasn't a grain of sand left. The next load was delivered into a cave made of the concrete bricks, and things then carried on. The present brick building was made later when the station was found to be practical, and it was to this building that I took my 2 visitors. All went well until one asked about the toilet. This was outside, a long drop country dunny with a chute going through the fence over a steep drop to I don't know where. He returned a few minutes later and could hardly speak. He took us outside to where there was a seat up against the drop. The wind had been strong, and the dunny and the fence had also taken the drop. I have no idea of his report to his superiors, but know that we quickly cut short that visit. Now to get back to radio, and I'd like to recount my first entry into radio transmitting. In 1936 or 37, I was attending Kyneton High School, and one of the subjects was physics. This subject was interesting, and we also had a teacher who took time to discuss happenings in the scientific world outside our class matters. Somehow, the subject came around to radio, and at least two of the students became very interested. At the same time, an old monthly magazine, Practical Mechanics, somehow appeared in our hands. As a result of the teacher's discussions and reading the magazine, we came to realise we could send Morse code with a spark transmitter. My father had a business down the street, and the front section was rented by a man who repaired cars. He had the remains of a T-model Ford in the back. It didn't take long for us to remove one of the spark coils, a spark plug, pieces of wire, and asked to use one of the batteries that were also there. We set the bits up with a wire from one side of the gap up to the roof, and the other side into a screwdriver in the dirt floor. We had our transmitter. At our house, we'd just graduated from a crystal set to a Croydon console, and I had inherited the crystal set complete with a long wire aerial. One of us boys went up to listen in on the crystal set, and after a while the other completed the primary circuit and watched the sparks. Then success. The second boy rushed back and said, "OK." Roles were reversed, and again success. This process was gradually improved, with one sending sort of Morse and the other copying. The received message was dash dot space dash dash dash, etc. In other words, reception was written as dots and dashes, although the sender tried to send off a copy of the Morse code that we'd acquired somehow. All went well for about a week, and then suddenly a contingent of officials arrived at the door of the garage, including the police sergeant and the postmaster telephone mechanic. "My, what have we here?" thundered the voices of authority. It appears that we were doing much better than we thought, and were completely blocking out the town radio. After a talking to, and a threat to give us a good kicking in the backside, we had to pull everything down, and thus ended my first radio experience. However, after I obtained my amateur radio licence in 1947, I've really enjoyed the hobby, and at 91 I still do, even though I'm not as active on air as much as I once was. Well, thanks very much, Alan VK3SM, for a very interesting item from your early radio history.
Thank you, Clive. You're listening to VK3OTN with the regular transmission of news and information for members and friends of the RAOTC.
Around the clock 24-hour medium frequency broadcasting. This article first appeared in OTN number 75, March 2025, and acknowledgements go to Telecom publication, The Broadcaster, March 1988. There was a time when radio broadcasting transmission times were much shorter. The evolution of 24-hour broadcasting took a long time to become the norm it is today. The National Broadcasting Service reached another milestone in its history on the 1st of August 1987, when a major part of the network began 24-hour operation. When Radio National increased its program hours on the 24th of January 1988, the entire National Broadcasting Service network provided continuous transmission for ABC programs. For at least 20 years from the commissioning of the first A-class stations, which were the forerunners of today's national service stations, closed down for intermissions several times during the day. The notion of broadcasting as a continuous flow of words and music had not yet arrived. Broadcast licence number 1, 2FC, went to air on the 5th of December 1923, playing a musical comedy. The station was started by the retail institution Farmer & Co. in arrangement with the Evening News, the Sydney Morning Herald, J.C. Williamson's, J&N Tate and Dalgety & Co. And as a footnote, Farmer & Co. was a department store in Sydney and was absorbed into the Myer Group, which still operates today. In 1929, the stations and studios in Her Majesty's Theatre in Sydney were taken over by the Australian Broadcasting Company. Known to ABC listeners for many years as Radio 2, it was rebranded Radio National in 1985. It was not usual for stations to commence transmissions before midday during the first 12 months of operation. A typical schedule for 2FC, for example, was divided into 4 sessions. They were the midday session from 12:55 to 1:15 p.m, an afternoon session 3:30 to 5 p.m, an evening session from 6:30 till 7:15 p.m, and the night session 8 to 10 p.m. By mid-1925, morning sessions had been introduced for Melbourne and Sydney stations. For 2BL, there were 2 sessions with an early session from 8 till 9 a.m, followed by another session commencing at 11:30. The 2FC morning sessions ran from 10:15 till 11:30 a.m. The programs comprised mainly of news, weather information, and talks of special interest to women, such as cookery, fashion, gardening and women's sport. By mid-1926, 2FC had brought its morning session 4 to 8 a.m, but 2BL had abandoned its morning session. All the other A-class stations, 3LO, 3AR, 5CL, 6WF and 4QG, commenced after 11:30 a.m, except 7ZL, which had a session from 11 a.m. till noon, but did not recommence until 3 p.m. In 1927, both 2FC and 2BL operated with 6 sessions throughout the day, commencing at 7 a.m. and closing down at 11 p.m. Most other stations throughout Australia had no morning transmission except 7ZL, but still had an 11 a.m. start. When the government was giving consideration in 1928 to acquiring the A-class stations to form a national broadcasting service, all stations had a morning session with commencing times varying between 7 and 11 a.m. In 1936, the Australian Broadcasting Commission had been in charge of program arrangements for 4 years. A start had also been made with the provision of regional outlets, and transmission hours still followed the pattern of a specific session with close-down periods between each session. The exception was that there was no shutdown between the evening and night programs. By 1938, a second metropolitan transmitter was in operation in each capital city. Together with regionals, this gave 23 transmitter outlets for ABC programs throughout the nation. With a few exceptions, programs for weekdays were broadcast from 6:30 till 10:15 a.m. and 12 noon to 11:30 p.m. A combination of additional regional transmitters and increased operating times gave the ABC coverage of most of Australia, much to the envy of commercial stations. The break in the morning transmission hours was subsequently closed, but over the following 60 years only minor changes took place. The start-up time was advanced to 5 a.m. and the shutdown extended to midnight. From the early days, broadcasting had provided an essential service different from the press and other sources of information and entertainment. We would be surprised if we could go back to the world before broadcasting to find how much we rely on it nowadays. We may not even turn on the receiver for quite long periods, but the set is there, and at the turn of a knob will, if not at the moment, at some fixed and reliable time within the next few hours, bring the latest news bulletin or an enjoyable entertainment program. Australia's recent bushfire and flooding disasters have often meant these national transmissions are the only form of information available, as even the mobile phone networks have proved unreliable in some situations. While there has been criticism of the ABC over the years, and the ratings fluctuate, it is during times of crisis that the ABC comes into its own and the ratings go up. Perth Luncheons. The popular and well-attended monthly luncheon for RAOTC members and friends in and around Perth are held on the second Tuesday of each month. The 7 Mile Bar and Bistro is at 501 Wanneroo Road, Balcatta. Their website can easily be found by googling 7 Mile Bar and Bistro. In addition to the main menu, a seniors menu is also available. There is ample parking available in the adjacent car park. The venue is located on Wanneroo Road near the Reed Highway intersection and is readily accessible with car parking available. Since Wanneroo Road is a main thoroughfare for the northern suburbs, public transport via bus is also a viable alternative. The appropriate route and timetable information can be accessed from the Transperth website. A copy of the URL is located on our website. Alasdair VK7AX is coordinating the lunch, and it would be appreciated if Alasdair could be notified of those planning to attend to ensure that adequate seating is provided. We look forward to seeing many of you at the RAOTC luncheon. Alasdair's email address is vk6kif@bigpond.com. I'll repeat that. Victor Kilo 6 Kilo India Foxtrot @bigpond.com.
You are listening to VK3OTN and associated relay stations. VK3OTN is the official station of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club, Australia Incorporated, with a monthly news and information bulletin for members and friends of the club.
And in keeping with tradition, we'll finish this month's broadcast with a short, humorous story. And this one's entitled Good Manners. A woman approaches a man and asks, "Excuse me, sir, I'm doing a little survey, and can I ask you a question?" The man says, "Of course you can." The woman says, "If you're travelling in a bus and a female gets onto the bus and she's got no available seat, would you give up your seat for her?" The man replies, "No." And the woman asks again, "What if the lady that got on the bus was pregnant? Would you give up your seat then?" The man replied, "Still, no." The woman is getting a little bit frustrated at this point. "What if the lady you got on the bus was a senior lady? Would you give up your seat then?" The man replied, "No." The woman in exasperation says, "You are one selfish man. You have no manners. Who do you think you are?" The man replied, "I'm the bus driver."
You have been listening to VK3OTN. VK3OTN is the official station of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club, Australia. This concludes this month's news and information bulletin. The next RAOTC news and information broadcast will take place on the first Monday of next month, on the same frequencies and at the same times as today, with the exception of January. Thanks for being with us, and we hope you will join in the callbacks, where callbacks are taken. 73 everyone.